Okay, so now we're back to the second half of our So Clear Talk double header for today. And I was in the Dayton Daily News the other day. And I don't know if you got a chance to read that yet, Tom. Tom Madison from Oregon here on the phone with me. I've been sort of going off. I haven't been very happy about this series of reports from Dayton, Ohio, and if anybody who's listening don't know what I'm talking about, there's been a series of articles in the Dayton Daily News out of Dayton, Ohio, in regards to the issue of registered citizens in nursing homes. And they published the names and addresses of every nursing home and every resident in every nursing home that contained a registered citizen and the registered citizens themselves, in addition to, humiliating and shaming them and stuff. Actually, I'm not, but I'm not going to talk so much about the nursing homes in itself. That's an issue. That's a huge issue for another day. But the problem that I had and what got me in touch with this reporter was that I sent her a pretty scathing email because she named and shamed this individual. And she had an individual who told his story about his experiences with struggles in trying to find a nursing home. And, of course, the headline says, "Convicted Rapist." Struggles to find adequate housing because of the nursing home issue. And so I sent her a pretty scathing email about that because I didn't like that. And so the reporter actually contacted me, and we had a lengthy conversation, close to an hour. And, I pitched, what I think about the registry, that we need to completely abolish it. And, and I told her, look, I wasn't happy about the fact that you published the names and addresses of all these people, that you're setting them up for, possible negative things happening to them. They could get kicked out of the nursing home. Somebody might go after them. I mean, it's always the possibility things happen. She kind of downplayed it a little bit. And I said, well, look, I don't appreciate the fact that you feel the name and shame these individuals. I said, why in the hell did you need to put the, convicted rapist on the headline? And she's like, well, I didn't write the headline. And everything. So a couple of days ago, back on the 21st of October, she wrote an article titled "Lawmakers, Sex Offenders in Nursing Homes Beg Issues for Questions." Begs for answers, I mean. And so I'm in the article, as well as a representative of the Ohio chapter of RSOL was listed in it. But of course, the representative is a woman, and she's not on the registry. And I'm on the registry. And so the reporter made it a point to talk about, to talk about my past. Okay. Is it necessary to discuss how I landed on the registry? Obviously you can look it up, but why put that in the article? Why was that relevant to the conversation? Why not just simply say that she wrote that I advocate for the rights of those on the registry through his website, oncefallen.com. Now I'm grateful that I got a shameless plug, but at the same time, she also put that I'm on the Ohio registry for, then she put, what my conviction was, which I didn't appreciate. And this has happened a lot of other times. I've been in the media a lot over the years for advocating, and Tom, you've been on it on a few occasions too. And how many times have we been on it that they haven't tried to bring this up?
Well, almost every time. I mean, you have to understand media today, and who doesn't understand media other than the media that is a profit-seeking media, where ads are sold, given according to the, ads. In other words, advertisements are the number one purpose in generating revenue. And of course, you need scary stories, outrageous stories, fearful stories to generate audiences, whether it's a newscast or a print shop, a print newspaper. But that's how our capitalistic system works today. It's to get readership, get viewership, and the way you do that is and the number one way to do that is through frightening headlines, such as you're getting at with the nursing home situation in Ohio, where a public official, a district attorney, I think his position was, saying that you would not want to live in a nursing home or have a loved one in a nursing home with a registered sexual offender, a sexual rapist. So they I guess, Derek, either they passed that law or it's on the way to being passed and signed into law, which it is. But but other places around the country do the same thing. They're beginning the process of laws that require notification to nursing home owners, and for the owners and the residents in some cases to know that a registered citizen is among those in that nursing home, and that all guards are up, any possible way to protect those people who stay in nursing homes is what the goal is, regardless of facts showing that registered sex offenders are just as law-abiding as anybody else.
Right. Well, I'm going to bring up something, and you can tell me how you feel about this. I mean, you probably remember this back when the Oregonian made that huge obnoxious headline, Oregon is sex offender haven. You remember that old Maxie Bernstein, call her Maxie Pad.
Yeah.
And she was, of course, nice enough to contact you and discuss, your feelings on this story. And of course, you were in one of her follow-up stories that came out on September 30th, 2013. I'm looking at it right now. I'm cheating. It's entitled "Sex Offenders in Oregon: Commentators Debate Effectiveness of Sex Offender Registry." And of course, it says Gresham resident Tom Madison, who leads a group called Oregon Action Committee, is a registered sex offender active in the national movement to fight mandatory registration laws. And of course, there's a quote from you, that the laws are unfair and keeps those convicted of sex crimes from being able to move on with their lives. But right after that, she points out why you were on the registry. Now, is that relevant? Could you tell me how you felt about the fact that she published that information that's kind of irrelevant? I mean, why do you think that she published that information about you specifically?
Well, yeah, obviously, a registrant is only looking after his own skin, his own future, so you have to help, demonizing the messenger, who in this case is a registrant, which is part of the story. Obviously, his words don't mean that much, because as a messenger who is not only has a message that's opposite of what supposed public safety is all about, he is the messenger himself is the subject, part of the subject of the topic today, and so needs to be tinged with a little bit of disrespect, so that his words aren't that important. And now we can get back to the main part of the story about demeaning registered citizens after they paid their price, their debts to society.
Yeah. When I've seen this, I've seen this a lot of times, and that's the attitude I feel that we get from reporters. It's like, okay, well, we're going to quote you, and she did put a couple of really good quotes in there from you, and everything. But it's that lingering thing. Well, the attitude, of course, which usually fills up comment sections, or the occasional nasty email that I might get from making a media appearance, is that, well, you just want off the registry. Well, of course I want off the registry. No damn, no duh. People have a vested interest.
I think what it is, Derek, is that there's this in the minds of not just reporters, but I think most of society who's been educated by these one-sided reporters and broadcasters and reporters over the years, is that You don't want to be soft on sex offenders, because when you're soft on sex offenders, then sex crimes skyrocket. It's the same old mantra of soft on crime. So if you're soft on crime, then of course mayhem breaks out. Banks are being robbed, children are being sexually molested, and all the other mayhem. You got it. So with this registrant, Tom Madison, having said what he has said, we have to make sure that, well, we have to admonish him a little bit, or at least bring out his evil past, so as to bring it into the light here, so that we're letting him know that we're not going to be soft on sex offenders, regardless of the fact that my debts are far in the past. And as a registered citizen, I'm continuing to be punished over and over again, and that is very unfair. And no other class of classification of former offender has ever had to do that before. No other felon, except for registered sex offenders. Sex offender felons are required to register on and on and on after the debt is paid. And it all gets back to that fear of not being tough on crime, and especially tough on sex offenders, where you give them an inch, and boy, Derek, they just go and take a mile, and there are 36 body bags, child-sized body bags on roadsides, having been molested and killed. That kind of fear monster. Right,
and that's what I see that as a huge problem. With our, I think that this reporter, both your reporter and mine, we just kind of have this mindset that it's become second nature to assume that, well, people have the right to know. And so they add this information because, obviously they're advertising the registry in each and every one of these articles. It's common that anytime you read a sex offender-related story that there's almost always going to be followed by a link at the bottom, click here to go to the sex offender registry and everything. And, getting back to the Dayton Daily News story, obviously she posted this big map of all the various places, and of course it's name and shame. And then this other individual that she had interviewed was also named and shamed as well. Well, this is why he's on the registry. A crime that happened in the fucking Carter administration. Give me a break.
But Derek, it ties into another one of the big myths about former offenders, registered sex offenders, is that you and I have talked about this a great deal. The registered sex offenders cannot be rehabilitated. They can't be cured. We use that word for fun sometimes, but they cannot be put back into society as normal citizens, normal, law-abiding, child-loving, society-loving citizens. Their minds are twisted, warped. You put them in a nursing home, Derek, and what's going to happen. There's going to be 3 sexual assaults in that nursing home, and the staff didn't know that was happening, or that person was a registered citizen, and now the lawsuits are flying. So they just can't be rehabilitated, I guess, is the underlying message of all of what is going on there. That Dayton article, perhaps.
Yeah. Well, this one individual in particular, in her story, the convicted rapist, quote unquote, under the story, convicted rapist says his care hurt by his offender status. Well, this you would think that the news media, that this reporter would understand, the implications that come with running a story like this and everything. Of course, she says, well, she's just trying to get both sides of the story and everything, but nobody's going to pity this person because he's on the registry. And there were a lot of nasty comments underneath underneath that particular story. One, I'm going to read a couple of them. One says, "Good, let sex offenders live their lives in misery." Let me see. There's another. Let's see. Did you read what this guy did, though? Who cares about the quality of his food, really? they don't care, so even when, here we are, a person who is, if you land in a nursing home, it's because you seriously need care. I mean, go to a nursing home, you can see how bad a shape that the patients are. I mean, they're not there because, they can do cartwheels and somersaults. And stuff that, again, just like we were talking about earlier with our hurricane shelter discussion, our desire for vengeance against people on the registry is so, is just so out there. Everybody.
Well, all that reporter had in mind, it seemed, was just, fanning the flames of social hysteria. What more can we do to these people? They're obviously an evil category of people. And so how can I make the most of my article? People should be concerned about these incurable derelicts, these sexual, perverts out to harm not just children, but as they get older, they still have a broken part of their mind that causes them to violate the sexual propriety of another person, another incapable person. Maybe sex offenders are feigning their illnesses and get into nursing homes so they can take advantage of people that can't defend themselves against assault, that kind of thing. But the bigger picture here is that registered citizens are being locked out of normal social relationships. We are being exiled step by step. First, it was Halloween that we couldn't put out decorations. Next, it was we couldn't go to the beach or parks. Next is we couldn't live in certain neighborhoods as residency restrictions pushed us out and away from the center of cities. Next, it was that we could not be in hurricane shelters, earthquake shelters, civil defense shelters of various kinds, and on and on. And it does, Derek, if you want to get to the very bottom of all this, it does tend to paint a future of when so many options for registered sex offenders in their living conditions and their emergency shelter accesses and other public safety sheltering options are limited or closed to them. It seems like a barbed wire fence around those who are registered citizens today in the future to be held under guard as those that cannot be let into society. They're going to have to live in their own communes and guarded, such as the internment camps of years and decades past. That seems to be where things are slowly moving forward.
And the media is playing their role in it, because any time that one of it, and here we are, 2016, we've been doing this for a long time. You've been in the media quite a few times over the years. I've been in the media quite a few times. And, the media, dealing with the media, it's a double-edged sword. I've not all my media experiences have been bad, and I certainly don't want to discourage other activists from being in the media. But, here, and maybe you can share one of your bad experiences as well, because I'm going to share a couple of mine real quick, and they're both very brief. The CNN sent somebody back in 2010, I believe. It was either 2009 or 2010, sent somebody all the way from Atlanta, Georgia to Sheffield, Alabama, where I was staying at the time, and had an interview, and ended up quoting me in CNN.com. But when the article initially came out, they used the term convicted pedophile. And obviously, you know how I feel about that term. It's like the N-word to blacks. And I, unfortunately for 6 hours, that had stayed up there until I finally got them to change it. Then they just changed it to, sex offender, which they love to use sex offender and pedophile interchangeably as it is. And that's one of my biggest pet peeves, convicted pedophile. You can't be convicted of pedophilia, because pedophilia is not a crime. It's a medical term, not a legal term. So anyways, I got them to change that, but because they used that term, I had maybe about half a dozen people send me some very scathing email. I had gotten death threats from people. Amazingly enough, they were all coming from the same city, some podunk place in Kansas. I don't know what it is with people in Kansas, by the way. That's a story for a different day, but it seems like some of the worst people I've dealt with on the internet over the years have come from Kansas. Go figure. The other thing was when I was on Russia Today a few years ago, you know, I kind of got one of these Nancy Grace wannabe types, but that wasn't really where the problem was. At the time, Russia Today had a feature on it, and they might still have it because I haven't looked at their website in years. On their website, you can download segments of news stories. You know, you can just download it directly onto your computer, which I think is great, except for the fact that the video of my interview was given the file name extension kidfucker. As you can imagine, I wasn't too happy with that one. And anybody's like, well, you know, you should have censored that or given me a damn trigger warning and kiss my butt. But, you know, I didn't appreciate the fact that they called me kid fucker. And that's what they called it. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. And I got them to go back and change it, but it was very disrespectful. They sent me a letter of apology. But still, you know, those are two of my worst experiences in dealing with the media is that, you know, is that they were actually brazen enough to say these things about me. What would you say was your worst experience in dealing with the media?
Well,
Tom,
I was thinking about that while you were talking, and I've had a few cases of being, mocked afterwards by those who were standing around during the interview process. But most of my interviews, it seems like, were ones where the reporter took the information, did the interview, the questions were asked, I provided answers, and then it disappeared down the memory hole. It's gone. It never made it to press. It never made it into the broadcast media. And I have guessed that the reason for that is that the media generally does not want the truth to come out, whether I'm pointing out a statistic of this or that, or whether I'm pointing out the harm brought to registered family members, or the harm brought directly to the registered citizen as a person who is incorrigible and is likely to reoffend again, and therefore does not have equal life chances in pursuit of employment or housing or normal social relationships. And so I guess my frustration is just never being covered. I mean, even though the effort goes into being available for those interviews. And I was thinking as you were talking, Derek, about your experiences with it. It reminds me of how many writers today dealing with society, general social, sociology in America today, studying aspects of our society, is that we are an extremely class-conscious society, and your place in society, it's important for you to be certainly above as many other subclasses below you as possible to maintain any degree of self-worth, status, and so forth in the pursuit of material gain, of whatever slight celebrity or 15 minutes worth of fame that you can get in your life. But it boils down to classism as the underlying principle for most things that happen in society. And when you commit a crime or you're convicted of a crime, then you fall down 5 notches or 8 notches. You'll never be brought back up to the normal status that you were. The ladder climbing, the ladder itself for improving yourself and moving up in society is completely removed from you. You are painted with the crime that you committed. You can't wash it off. It's a stain that is going to be there forever, and you are your crime. Seems to be the message in this class-conscious society. If you commit a crime, you're stained with it forever. You're never separated from the crime. Your humanity is never separate from the crime that was committed so long ago, the one that you were convicted of. And so I think it's all a matter of ladder climbing socially, ladder climbing economically, materially, and class status is very important. And if one more criminal comes along that is convicted of that crime, then he can be put down below me, and I effectively move up the escalator one step. I'm one step higher. So it's not just race, it's not just ethnic categories of various societies. It also includes our inherited wealth, but also now to more and more criminal status, or whether we have a clean sheet or whether we have a littered sheet full of information of past crimes committed. It's
right.
that which keeps us down, I guess.
Right. Well, getting back to the nursing home issue, I mean, I do want to bring this up very briefly, since it was discussed in the article, which we're kind of, I certainly want to, bring this up before we close for today, because we're getting right around the time getting right around the time of the end of this here. It was pointed out, and I discussed this briefly in the last segment, about the whole separate but equal issue. And, you've been talking about it a little bit, and I have too. Oklahoma actually tried this already. That was mentioned in the article. I knew that they couldn't find anybody to bid on the contract to have this facility built. And so the separate nursing home issue was ultimately, they haven't resolved that issue there in Oklahoma, but for now they don't have a separate facility. I believe there was what I was trying to find, and I still can't find it, but I know I've read it, and it's in my article somewhere in the middle of this. I wrote an article here in Ohio because they were going to try to do the same thing. And so the problem with Oklahoma was that it was going to be run by the Department of Corrections. And, the Department of Corrections does not build facilities for people who are free. That should scare anybody with this particular issue. And that's why we don't want any of the other states going down the same path Oklahoma did. I mean, could you imagine who in the hell would send their family member to a nursing home run by the Department of Corrections, essentially a prison? So anytime somebody starts mentioning separate facilities for registered citizens, they really need to keep this in mind. Just look at what happened in Oklahoma. And I think Minnesota, it was either Minnesota or Wisconsin, was also looking to do the same. And in the course of building this facility, they had an incident where the fire alarms went off, and what happened was the fire alarms would slam the doors and lock the doors rather than the opposite. So it's almost as if the place was wired to, okay, if the place catches fire, lock everybody in, let them burn to death.
Yeah, that's a scary future. With as you're pointing out in Oklahoma, law enforcement or prison-run nursing homes kind of goes hand in hand with the lifetime imprisonment of those released from prison but are held in commitment centers around the nation, various commitment centers, and on and on. It is a trend that is creeping forward where it doesn't matter that you've served your time. If the state, for whatever reason it wants to, and find to detain you, to hold you after a sentence was served, it's more of the same kinds of policies that you see or you saw in the Soviet Union, where dissidents, for example, were considered or evaluated as mentally ill. I mean, how could anybody stand up against the state and say something or to write something bad about the state? No, they must be mentally ill and were held in psychiatric facilities because of their anti-government views of at the time of those citizens in the Soviet Union. you can
Right.
see that kind of things at the edges coming into view here in America.
Well, before I close, I feel like I have to bring this up for anybody who's listening. For those who are in particularly concerned about the nursing home issue, if you're looking into the nursing home issue, you really need to watch out for a person by the name of Wes Bledsoe. He runs a group called A Perfect Cause. He's the victim industry person for this for this kind of issue, and he puts a lot of bogus statistics out there. And of course, he was mentioned in one of the Dayton Daily News articles. And but I'm already familiar with him because I wrote I wrote a report a few years ago to try to stop Ohio from from clamping down on registrants in nursing homes. And so this person has a lot of influence, and of course he's targeting nursing homes who open their doors to people on the registry. So he was also instrumental in trying to get the separate but equal Oklahoma facility. So, yet another name that we're going to have to get familiar with as people do more research into this issue. Now, I will be writing a new report on this, mostly taking the information that I wrote from a few years ago, and posting it on my website. So be looking for that report within the next couple of weeks. And that way people can get a little bit more familiar with this. As far as dealing with the media, what I suggest to people is I set down a few ground rules before speaking with somebody. I tell them no P words. Predator, pervert, pedophile. You better not use those words and refer to me. I prefer and I prefer that they use the term registered citizen. That's about the best one that's about the best non-offensive label we have at the moment. So and that's the thing, you don't have to accept every single media interview. And everything. And what I would also suggest to people is you make sure that you have a few talking points, and that you stick to your guns, and that you be a little bit more careful about the things you say with the media, because they can be easily misinterpreted and misconstrued. Now, you can give the best interview in the world, but you can have 40 minutes of great and wonderful interview, but you're going to get one maybe two quotes in the newspaper. Or one or two little sound bites on TV or in the radio or whatever. Rarely are you going to get an entire segment. So, you want to keep that in mind. The better sound bites you have, obviously, the bigger chance that clip is going to be out there. And you certainly have to watch out for the intent of the reporter. And the easiest way to know that is to see if they keep coming back to this, if they keep persisting in a particular line of questioning. But I tell them, most importantly, and I think we've learned, even I have learned this the hard way, we don't talk about our past. We're not going to do an interview to discuss what I did in 1999. We're told this is 2016. We're not going to party like it's 1999. So that's my advice. If you got some advice to add to people, Tom,
I think you pretty much covered it. That I did in the latest KATU interview done about a week ago is outline in a shell fashion the general outline of where I was, without any specific details, such as the year of conviction and the my criminal record as in terms of charges. And pointing out again, like you were just saying, that it was 16 years ago. This is a lot of people. A lot of time has passed since then. And, everybody changes in that amount of time. And we're talking about not me today. We're talking about in Oregon at least. We're talking about 29,000 registered citizens plus their family members affected, drastically affected by these sex offender laws. And that's where the story's going to be today. Otherwise, we're not talking it through.
Exactly. Well, I think we've droned on long enough on this particular subject. Obviously, if anybody's listening and they want to download this discussion, there should be a link below the YouTube video to TalkShoe, and you can download it from there. You can certainly send ideas and suggestions about future discussions, and who knows, maybe we'll even interview one of you if you want to come on the show and have a discussion sometime. Obviously, we're doing this as sort of a way to just sort of, help get people up to speed on some of the current issues that are affecting us, from two longtime activists. So, feel free to share your ideas or suggestions or feedback. So, Tom, we'll do this again sometime.
I hope so.
All right. You enjoy the rest of your day, and thank you for listening.